I have standards, you fuck. Hey, we have camera now.
Hi.
What's up,
What are you looking at?
bitch?
Hi.
I love you. So welcome to another episode of the Coffee Spill Podcast.
Yeah.
You weren't here for a while.
No.
How'd that feel?
I'm home.
Okay. Before we get started, this episode is going to be a bit different because we actually have video for this episode. So if you're new to the podcast, check it out on YouTube at the Coffee Spill Podcast, because our timer for today is Smash Brothers. I've been training the Mario amiibo, and I have all these other amiibos at like level 1, so he's gonna like kick their ass right now, and that's our timer.
Oh shit.
When the game's over, that means the podcast is over. So that's just gonna be playing in the background while we play, or while we talk. Actually, I'm putting the volume down. So how you been?
Been pretty good. Pretty good. Cooking a lot.
Okay, that's good.
How about you, man?
I've been tired.
That makes two of us.
Right now, the biggest thing that comes to mind is like Game of Thrones.
Yeah. I don't watch. I read two of the books. Out of order, so I didn't know what the hell was going on.
Wait, you actually read them?
Yeah, only two. I was like, damn, this is kind of boring. But then I looked back and I was like, well, dumbass, you read it out of order. So I'm kind of tempted to go back and read them in order.
When did you read them? I live with you.
It was when I was back in high school.
Did you read them at school?
Yeah, I had a
Oh.
friend that had them, that brought a copy every once in a while, and I asked her if she could let me borrow it reading during school.
So what's it about? There's one of my coworkers. They try to explain it to me. I don't understand it.
So basically, there's different families, different kingdoms according to the families, and these kingdoms are kind of rivaling. They're turning against each other. A few enemies become friends. You know, it's the show basically is the definition of the enemy of my enemy is my friend.
Sounds like Texas in the 1800s.
Basically, and yeah, it's one of those shows where to me personally, I stopped reading it because it was overly hyped, and when you overly hyped something, it kills it for me, at least for me.
I started hearing about it, I think like in 2014, 2015,
Mm-hmm.
and it killed it for me because it got overhyped.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's exactly what I said. Like, because I get it. Like, there's dragons, and when it comes to dragons, I'm a huge sucker for that. And it's the same thing. Like, for example, Fortnite and Star Wars. I like Star Wars, but the way how things have been going with Star Wars right now, it's overdoing it. Like, the nostalgia hype was there, but then after expectations happen, and they took risks, I can respect that, but I don't like how the fans were overdoing it. And coming from a Star Wars fan, I kind of drifted away from it. And that sucks for me to say that, because that's actually the first time I ever done that, and I'm worried about that with Marvel, because that's been really hyped, and I've been really, really excited about for Spider-Man Far From Home, for example. So, and that's one of my favorite characters. So I've been like very, very worried that that's gonna happen with me with Marvel.
Well, like, there was like this smugness about Game of Thrones, I noticed. It's like this culture that's like, for me, like the average viewer, and if you like Game of Thrones, this isn't like a jab at you, this is just my perspective, but the average viewer to me seems kind of snooty, kind of snobby.
Yeah.
And from what I heard, the second to last episode was like really bad.
Yeah.
And people were hating on it, and I was like in like my little corner. I was like, yes.
I heard multiple stories about. I'm gonna cut you off. Go ahead.
And so, I think the finale was yesterday,
Yeah.
as we were recording
The
this.
series finale.
Yeah, and people were saying it was like, it's not at all where the author wanted to go with it, and basically got ruined. And then there was like an interview where like he made a statement saying, like, the author, I think, what's his name?
George R.R. Martin?
I think so. And that guy, he was like, oh, they didn't do what I wanted them to do. And then in my head, I'm like, why don't you finish the books?
that's funny because I heard a different story, because they were doing so well and they were pumping out episode out of episode out of episode per episode. They had a schedule and everything, and they've been making so much money out of that show, so it was reasonable and it actually made sense for them to actually spend extra money and cancel the schedule for season 8, because they caught up on everything, and the author was actually still in the middle of writing his next book of the Game of Thrones series. It's basically what happens with some anime, where some, like for example, Soul Eater finished the anime, the show, finished first
before the manga.
Yeah, and that's why the manga's so different, and that's why a lot of people prefer the manga better, because they were paying attention to how the author, the person who wrote the manga, was writing it out as if it was a conclusion, whereas in Soul Eater, in the show, they were kind of like trying to finish it off, but they were implying that no, this can keep going. Where George R.R. Martin said that, yeah, I understand that they try to go to this route because I didn't finish it and the script was done and they didn't have they didn't have any time to finish it. So George was like, it's not what I wanted, but if the people like the stories out of the books better and prefer that to be more canon, then that's fine.
From what I heard is he basically gave the producers a rundown and the writers a rundown of the direction he wanted everything to go in. But by that point, the books and the TV series had diverged so much that it's like it would have taken a miracle of writing to like bring it back to what he wanted. At least that's my understanding. Like this is coming from like not a Game of Thrones fan. Like I'm not in the loop at all.
Neither am I. I do understand the frustration from the fans. And at first I was like, well, this is based off of the book and you guys should know what happens. But then that's when it reminded me like, oh wait, George was basically in a hurry. The dude can write as fast as he can.
Well,
he can write so fast.
It's like you. That's not a valid argument either. Saying like, well, you read the books, you know what to expect. It's like, well, what about the Infinity War? People read the comics. It's like you know what to expect. But the movie was, I imagine the movie's different from the comic book.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, I even read Jaws and saw the movie, and it's one of those. In fact, it's one of those stories where you would actually say that the movie is way better than the book.
It's the same thing with like Harry Potter. Like I read the series, like the movies go a slightly different route. They do keep true to some things, but there's some things in the books where I would have wanted to see that.
Yeah, that's my pet peeve about novel-based films now these days. Harry Potter, they've executed it a lot better, but the thing is that they've been around the series and the whole franchise, the film franchise, has been going so well that they were like, let's keep going. They try to do their best with the pacing and leave out what's more important to the story, what's not important. And if I recall, they even added a few scenes that isn't even in the book.
Harry Potter?
Yeah.
It's been a while. I'd have to read them again and watch them again, but I don't have time for that. But yeah, definitely, like there are some differences, and I mean, obviously, it'd be almost impossible and too expensive to make a page-for-page, shot-for-shot version of a book to a movie, because there's so much more detail in a book, and to put every single bit of every single scene from the book into a movie would be really hard. Like, for example, I think in Harry Potter Sorcerer's Stone in the book, there's a whole chapter where Harry, Hermione, and Ron, I blanked on his name, they all go to like a party with like the ghosts of the castle, and that wasn't in the movies. And I'm like, but I was reading it in the book.
Oh yeah, I remember you told me that. Yeah.
And in the book, it seemed like a pretty freaking fun party, where there's like a banquet and the ghosts can't eat. So instead what they do is they just pass over the food and they can taste it. And like the three heroes, like the three kids, they're like, and they don't really want to eat it because to them it's like weird. But it's I would have wanted to see that party.
Now that you mention it, I remember you telling me that, and it was the first time or second time that I saw Prisoner of Azkaban, and there's a scene in the movie where Gryffindor, the same students, it's their new year. They're about to get into their dorms, and there's this one kid who's about to walk through a ghost, and the kid, I guess he was able to feel the cold eeriness out of that ghost.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, "Oh, what the hell?" And the ghost was walking. He was like rubbing himself like this, like, "Oh, that was actually tasty." The ghost wasn't phased by it, and I was like, "Was this ghost a cannibal or something?"
Oh yeah, I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, he was like this, like, "No, I actually hit the spot."
That's probably. Wait, but I think he was walking out of the Great Hall, so he's probably just eating too. I don't, or it was a nod to the book.
Probably, but yeah, like back to like Game of Thrones. It's I am tempted to watch it now since the series is now over. Because, again, the hype is going to go down. There are going to be dedicated fans to that, like how there's dedicated Harry Potter fans. But I want to get into it finally to just, for the sake of the story, and see what the fuss is about. And at the same time, I also do appreciate how instead of making it into a full-blown film, they actually take their time making episodes. And yeah, there's a limit of how many episodes you can release, but I never hear that there's any limits of an episode, because I remember even times where they've made an hour and a half or even a 2-hour episode for a TV show.
Well, those are more like, it depends on the series, because like for example, the first show that popped into my head, Doctor Who, so those are typically like 45 minutes to an hour, like give or take a commercial break. So I mean, if you extend those to like a 2-hour special, that's what they are. They're specials.
Well, also this was aired on HBO, where there's no
commercials,
no commercials at all.
No, that's interesting.
No TV spots. So at that point, they're all game. They're like the majority of their profits would be coming from sponsors before the show and after the show, and then also how many viewers. That's the most challenging thing. That's why HBO has their own streaming service.
I'm wondering why they decided to, because from what I heard it was the final season. There was only I think 6 episodes, but each episode was longer.
Yeah.
And as each episode progressed, each episode got longer and longer until like the last one I think was like, going off the top of my head, I think it was like an hour and a half, almost 2 hours. So I'm wondering why they did it that way rather than stick to tradition, where I'm sure they would have taken their time and dragged it out more rather than just kind of like rush it. Because from the outside point of view, it does seem rushed.
Yeah, like that's a good point. That's another segue that I noticed when we saw the final season of Samurai Jack on Toonami. It was taking its time setting up the premise of Samurai Jack himself and the situation of his entire adventure, and you start to see how it's dark, it's serious. It's no longer a fun adventure story where it's him trying to find his way home. He's given up. He's suicidal. He's in a very, very dark spot and has this terrible sense of guilt inside of him. But then as it progresses, it starts to get like a little bit closer to the point, and you start to connect with Jack and what's her name again? Ashi.
Was that her name?
Yeah.
I was gonna say Aki or something.
Yeah, her name is Ashi, and they start to connect even together. But then towards the very, very end, it became a little bit like they just wanted to finish it. Like this is their last episode. This is the budget. Finish it, and that's it.
It was 12 episodes, right?
I thought it was 10.
It was like somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
Samurai Jack, the final season was interesting because watching it on like Boomerang or when it comes out on Toonami, whenever, if you see like the earlier seasons, like the very first few episodes, they're like back to back, basically like following how Jack got into the future.
Mm-hmm.
But then as it progresses, it's like, there's an order to them and you can see his growth as a person, but it feels like what's the adventure for this week, where sure there's progression, but do you see what I'm trying to say?
Filler.
it's kind of like filler,
Yeah.
but you can see him trying to get to his ultimate goal. But with the final season, obviously each episode was like, you have to watch them in order or you won't get anything. Whereas you can pretty much jump into like any episode of Samurai Jack and just kind of like go from there, because there's arcs, but there's no super heavy continuation.
Yeah. In fact, there's one episode where Samurai Jack meets this big buff blue dude with these red sunglasses,
Oh yeah,
and he has this really deep smooth masculine black voice.
it's like a jazzy voice.
Yeah, and I heard that voice numerous times. It's the same voice actor. I don't know who his name. I don't even know how he looks like. But he's voiced a lot of characters.
I think he's voiced a lot of characters on that show.
Yeah, a lot of Toonami. I mean, what's the Gandhi? That's the artist's name. The guy who created the Samurai Jack world, Dexter's Laboratory. He even did Hotel Transylvania, by the way.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, that was his art style, his story, everything in that movie. That was him.
Oh, yeah. I guess if I think about it, it does look familiar.
Yeah, you ever thought of that? Like, I was looking at it and I was like, this looks very familiar and nostalgic in a way.
I knew that when I saw those trailers, I'd be like, something feels like really familiar about this.
Yeah. So anyway, like, there's an episode where Jack fights him, and Jack is really holding his own until the end, and he gets beaten to a pulp. Like, he gets beaten up almost to a point near death.
Mm-hmm.
And the portal out of nowhere starts talking to the big blue guy, and he was like, oh, okay, that's a good point. As if the portal told him something like he's not ready to go back. It's almost like a Doctor Strange moment where a few chain of events need to happen in order for this to happen. And so the blue guy calls like some sort of animal and tells him to pick up Jack and take him away somewhere far where he won't know where this portal is. And he says like, you're not ready yet, Jack. And then he turns to the portal.
Yeah.
And it's Samurai Jack, old. I think he lost an arm and has a robotic arm.
It's like Future Jack.
Yeah, and he looks older. He has a thick beard. He's kind of like, instead of a samurai attire, he has like this modern Viking knight.
From what I remember, it's
style.
like it's more like a warlord thing.
Yeah, like he became like a ruler or a general.
I'm kind of disappointed that didn't come back into like the final season.
Yeah, like I was like only one season, and it's like, yeah, he finally got to tell his story, but I wanted more. Like I really wanted to see more of it.
Didn't you say there was like a continuation comic?
I think
I heard from somewhere. I had to look into that.
even the creator said that he finished telling his story, but you could kind of see it in certain episodes, at certain spots, and certain points in the show, in the whole show itself. That he kind of left it open for anybody who wants to touch on that arc, on the lore of Samurai Jack. Like he wants to, if anybody wants to continue a story, maybe spread the universe of Samurai Jack, he said, yeah, go for it. Because there's even subtle Easter eggs implying, even some of the creators say that, the writers would say that, yeah, Samurai Jack is actually taking place thousands of years before Dexter's Laboratory. Some have said that, and it's like, you're probably just pulling our strings just to poke fun of it, like maybe something could happen, but I'm not what's the word, hoping for anything at this point.
You're not open for anything?
I'm not hoping anything at this moment.
Oh,
like,
you're not too hopeful. You're just like,
yeah, it's like, okay.
Well, yeah, because like
that's a cool jab there.
I think first episode or second episode, but like when he shows up to the future, one of the dogs is like, he looks like a dog that appears repeatedly in the Powerpuff Girls.
Yeah, that's what I noticed too.
Or like there's like billboards that are like broken down, and whatever advertisement was on there, it shows up in the Powerpuff Girls. Or even it's implied that like one of the destroyed cities is Townsville.
Yeah, there's even one oh yeah. That I remember that too. There's even one episode where I think there's like this big giant thing was eclipsing the sun, and they were showing a few shots of innocent bystanders and civilians looking at this big thing in the Powerpuff Girls, and one of the civilians was actually Dexter. He was actually in Townsville looking up.
Oh, really?
That was like detail by detail, the care and everything. It was Dexter.
I wonder. Well, because I know there were some video games,
Yeah.
and in the video, especially there was an online video game where like all the Cartoon Network characters of the time, they got together and like you could interact with them. But I'm wondering if like in the lore of Cartoon Network in general, if they're all connected, kind of like Smash Brothers. Like I think Nintendo confirmed that there is a Nintendoverse, and there is a world where like there's Pokemon. There's a world where like it's the Mario world, and there's like they confirmed it.
Yeah, and actually, nice segue that the writers of Detective Pikachu, I think I told you about this. They're open to make a Smash Brothers universe, but
You did tell me this.
but I'm like, I don't want Action Live.
I don't know if I want that. I'd want, like we talked about this a little bit. I'd want it to be animated.
Yeah,
but I don't know how well they could do it with over half the roster. Like they don't speak. Like it's the only thing that Mario really does is like a few catchphrases, but he doesn't really talk. Or like Link, he just yells and grunts.
I mean, yeah, there are some characters, and I can guarantee you it's like it's challenging writing, because there are some characters that talk and there's some that don't. But then there's also like the Pokemon. It would make sense, if Red was actually in it, who he can talk for these Pokemon, and it helps progress the plot more. And the Pokemon are in unison agreement with that. Like they work so well together, the Pokemon with their master, such as Red or Ash, whoever they want to put in. And
I'm pretty sure they would put Red in.
Maybe for pure fan service, which is another thing. Like there's so much. I mean, from the colors and then also the visuals, there's so much that they can do out of it. But the issue is like the lack of dialogue for some of these characters. And if they actually even tried to let the characters talk that don't talk, it'd be kind of challenging and risky take.
Well, I mean, I'm sure if they got the right, I think one of the biggest one of the biggest risks is the voice actors, because, like, for example, Ryan Reynolds, I never would have in a million years pictured him voicing Pikachu. Like, you could have told me that 5 years ago, I would have been like, you're fucking insane. That doesn't make any sense. But it happened, and it's in theaters right now.
And he's killing it.
And so I can definitely see them taking liberties as long as they pick the right voice actors, because there was the Mario show back in, like, I think it was like the early 90s.
Yeah, he had this really deep, masculine.
No, he had like I'm not gonna try it, but he had like this like Italian New Yorker accent.
Yeah.
With Louis, and like they all had voices.
Yeah.
And then there was a Link, a Legend of Zelda show, or video game.
Yeah, it was a TV show. It looked weird.
Yeah. So I mean, like, giving them dialogue wouldn't be like too far fetched, especially because it is implied in some games that they do talk.
Mm-hmm.
For example, like Paper Mario. It's an example. Paper Mario, he doesn't talk at all. He has no dialogue.
Yeah.
But characters react to him as if he did talk.
Yeah.
So I mean, giving them voices wouldn't be too far fetched. It's just, I think the biggest issue is what would they sound like? What would they say? How would they behave with dialogue? Because most of these characters, we just know them through grunts and reactions.
Yeah, I totally get that, because even one of the voice actors, what's his name, Kevin Conroy, who voices Batman constantly. He is the guy who voices Batman a lot.
Oh, he's the one for like the original animated series?
Yeah, from the animated series, the Arkham games, some of the newer TV shows, and as well as video games. He himself feels like he knows the character well enough where when he reads the script, he can immediately rephrase the dialogue in a different interpretation that makes it sound like, yeah, that's exactly what he would say.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes he will even take that risk and say, like, yeah, it doesn't sound like he would say that, but it's new and fresh. I'm gonna try it. and his fans will call him out and say like, this isn't something what he would say. Like, I don't feel like that's a good thing.
But then he's like, shut the fuck up. I'm Batman. I know what I'm doing.
No, but like he even said it himself in one interview where he says, and I quote, that I've been doing the character for almost 20 years. The audience know him a lot better than I do, and they would know within a second if I did something inauthentic, and they call me out on it. And I think it's cool and yet also a bit selfish at the same time, because yeah, you understand how Batman is. Like, there's a certain aura, there's a status of the character. However, he's not real, and you want to like
the way you said that, he's not real.
Yeah.
It's like you're talking to like a kid, like, he's not real.
Like, it's because I mean, like, it's a common argument that everybody says, and everybody hates it when people say that.
Was that if characters aren't real?
Well, yeah, I mean, like, he's not real, you know that, right? You know, and then they'll be like, and then they'll just complain like,
fuck you, he's more human than you. He's real to me. He saved my mom.
Look, I'm a big Spider-Man fan, and I even know he's not real, and I still wish I want to be like him.
He's not real? What the fuck, man?
Shut up. Anyway, like, again, he's what was I gonna say? Fictional characters, they have an initial attitude, but that doesn't mean that they're not versatile. So sometimes when you're trying to, I don't even know where I'm going with this, honestly.
Well, like, let me chime in here. So I think I kind of know what you're going with. So it's like there's like the base form of a character, like since we're on DC, Superman.
Mm-hmm.
There are so many versions of that character. Even Spider-Man, there's so many versions of these characters, but like everybody knows collectively there are certain traits that these characters have that make them who they are. Superman can fly, he's really strong, he's from Krypton, he's weak to kryptonite, he's powered by the sun, he has heat vision, all these like general things. But the way they behave and the things that they do, from there it depends on the directing and the writing of these. And when I say the direction, I mean like the comic book directing. I don't mean the movies, more, but like also the animated series or the movies. But yeah, the way that these characters behave, it typically comes down to the writing and the directing, and that's where people get mad, because sometimes they want to be experimental with it, and some people might be on board with it, others might hate it. Kind of like when Batman used a fucking gun, or he killed in in BVS. It's like we did get like a basic form of Batman, but then it took it to a different direction, and that's when people get like kind of mad, because it's like, oh, this isn't the real Batman, this isn't what he would do. But then it's like, well, you're right, that's not what the Batman you know would do, but that's what this Batman does. This Batman is not the Batman you know. Yeah,
and at the same time, with that argument, they also mentioned like, well, something triggered him to do this, because he would never do this. But then they will mention the comics saying that, well, he killed because of this reason, he killed because of this reason, the Joker finally cracked him and that's why he killed, and this and that. Like, there's good reasons why he has to do it, and people will think that there's not much going on, enough reasoning of why he would do it. And honestly, if you look clearly at the film, for example, it's pretty clear. He's taking drugs, he's drinking. It looks like he has clinical depression, because he's got so many pills there, and I'm pretty sure that half of those pills are even meant to treat his arthritis, because he's constantly, because in the film it says that he's been doing it for 20 years.
Yeah.
So he's probably broken a few bones, and he has to treat them. So, and then he's also, again, he's drinking, and he's still has this really bad sense of like guilt and yet also hate. So, there's story behind it that you want to know about it, which makes you think that, okay, somewhere along the line, something broke you, and this made you lose hope and not give a shit and kill these people.
Yeah, rather than be annoyed at, or be angry at the fact that, oh, Batman doesn't kill, blah, 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 it's like, think of like what it took to make him break that rule.
Yeah, and
because it's like in the comics, he has plenty of options or plenty of opportunity to cross that line.
Yeah.
But so then it's like, but he's always like had the will to not do it. So just thinking about like what pushed you, I think that's pretty interesting too. Like, what did it take to do that?
Yeah, I had this friend who told me like I didn't like it because Batman killed, and there was no reason why. And it's like, again, this is Zack Snyder what we're talking about. He's good at presenting detailed visuals that sometimes, and this is a bigger pet peeve of mine in film, where you want the film to tell you why, but you don't want it to be obvious to make you feel stupid. Like, this is what's going on, and it's telling it to your face, and it makes you feel like, okay, I get it. This is what's going on. But instead, you provide visuals, you provide detail, they present body language, emotions, attitude. And again, I told my friend, like, watch it again and watch frame by frame, detail by detail on the film. Because, again, this is Zack Snyder we're talking about.
Yeah, I think we had this conversation when we walked out of BVS. Like, we walked out of it, and I don't know what you thought, but I was thinking, like...
You were iffy the moment we got out.
Yeah, I was like, kind of like half. Like, 'cause I saw the plot holes. Especially, like, the biggest one that comes to my mind. And the one that I always bring up, and you know what I'm about to say.
Yeah.
How the fuck does Lex Luthor know? Like, I don't understand how he knows. I've seen that movie like 5 times. I have no idea how Lex Luthor knows.
How Superman is Clark Kent?
Yeah, like, how does he know? Like, what the fuck? And that's the biggest issue I have. But some of the biggest complaints that I saw had to do with, like, people not understanding who these characters are.
Yeah.
And then there's people that argue saying, like, well, you should make a movie for, like, general audience. But then it's like, but it's DC. Like, who are these movies for?
Yeah.
They're for the fans. And so the fans are the ones that are going to understand and really be on board with these movies. Somebody who isn't a fan of Batman or even remotely knows either character, thank you, they're not going to understand what's going on. So when like coming out of BVS, sure, there's plot holes. Sure, there's really weird moments.
Yeah.
And you question, like, why did that have to be in the movie? But and this isn't like a defense, like, but if you overlook it, it's not as bad of a movie as people make out to be. It's a fun movie. It's
still fun. It's beautifully shot. It's dark, but at the same time, it's beautifully visualized and presented, and that's my personal criticism to Marvel, where they'll have these wide shots, they'll show these beautiful visuals in their films, but when you look at Star Wars, as bad as The Last Jedi may be,
how do you know you haven't seen it?
I know I haven't seen it, but I mean, I keep hearing a lot of complaints now. But despite what critics say, I look at certain shots. I even saw like some cut scenes, and it has beautiful shots, real environmental shots, and also
I don't think that the issue with Last Jedi comes from shots. I think it comes from like the story perspective.
Well, I mean, yeah, there's a story, but okay, that's another thing that I would love and appreciate is as long as the story is properly executed and properly written, and it has a perfect beginning, a decent middle, and a phenomenal ending. At that point, go all out in visuals, you know. And I actually would really appreciate if studios really dedicated some time and like they're reasonable with their money. Like, they'll fund the director, they'll fund other studios. Yeah, here's the money, and you can pay us back. And I get that. Like, they're good with giving a certain amount of money for the film. I personally wish that they could actually take their time a little bit more into their visual effects, their cinematography, maybe add a few things here and there to make it more, to provide more depth for the film.
It's harder when it comes to bigger studios because the studios, they want results like within a certain time frame, and it's like, sure, you can have the money in the world, you can have all the money in the world, but as long as you're constrained on time, and you have to like really make your employees work hard on getting what you want, it's gonna be really hard.
I get it, and I know that, like, time is money, and they're on a very, very tight schedule, and I've seen videos and documentaries of how directors work. They have that same attitude that I've seen in the kitchen. They got to make things go. They had to make moves. They had to take these risks and make it work.
It's not even always the director though. It's like, well, I mean, sure, the director's the one that's like calling the shots, or like,
yeah, he knows what he wants.
but it's like, it's the assistant director that's like, move it, come on, get the fuck out of here.
Yeah, I saw behind the scenes of Transformers 2, for example, and the director, Michael Bay, he would come in and he would like tell them to do this, to do that, set up explosives, and he's always telling them to hurry up really quickly. And when the explosions and the action scene is done, when the takes are done, he'll actually immediately just get off of his director's chair, take off his headphones, and he walks away and immediately gets in his car and starts to make phone calls immediately. And he's leaving the rest of the crew to just pick up the pieces, clean up the mess, let the actors take their rest, have lunch breaks and all that. He has to go, and because he probably has another movie in the works, he probably has another script to write.
Or there's probably another scene that they're shooting like right down the street.
Yeah,
or whatever.
Yeah, that's another thing. Like, they're probably setting up the scene, the set for another scene that's immediately ready to go over there, which is another thing. More employees, more equipment, more pyrotechnics, for example, because that's an action film.
Yeah, it just depends on what the movie is.
Yeah, and I get it. You're trying to save money, but at the same time, like, I, as a moviegoer who really loves film, as a pure enjoyment, I actually would appreciate if they take their time.
Yeah, but like, there's you can say that, like, take your time, and like, you can talk to the studios and say, let the directors do what they want or do what they need to do. But even then, it's like, even working on like short films with friends, or like small skits that I've helped be on, or help record, even small scale stuff goes wrong all the time, and stuff you wouldn't even think that goes wrong. And it's not always a studio's fault. It's sometimes stuff that happens on set. Sometimes whatever vision that the director has, that the writer has, that the director of photography has, whatever visual design they're thinking about, it doesn't always come out. It doesn't always come out the way you think it's going to come out. It doesn't always happen the way you want it to, but you do your best to get at least 90% of the way to what you imagined. Because it's not perfect. It's not always perfect.
That you brought that up, that actually immediately reminded me of how Jaws was produced.
Wrap up this point because we're almost out of time.
Oh, shit.
But yeah, just finish this point and then...
Yeah, I remember you telling me... not you telling me, like, what you just said. I was watching a documentary of how Jaws was created, and they all kept saying that this is the film that pretty much almost ended Steven Spielberg's career before he even started. Cause
I would love to like research this a bit and talk about this, because I think Jaws is like a very interesting.
It's really cool. I could save you the trip if you don't mind. Like, so Steven Spielberg at that time, he was like around 26 years old. Uh-huh. Like, he's the same age as you. Like, I mean, actually,
now they know.
I mean, it's still young.
I'm 25, by the way.
All right, good correction. Anyway, he already directed like about 2 films at the time, but they weren't like big blockbuster films. At least the term blockbuster didn't even exist at the time.
They were like independent films?
Yeah. He directed a movie called Duel, which is like this demonic truck that kills people. I'm not kidding. It's actually kind of interesting. But anyway, the movie Jaws was published. The book, and it was knocking out all other books out of the lists, out of the water basically, and it's selling a lot of copies, and people are so interested in it, and people were thinking like, this never would work out. Like, nobody thought that a book about a shark attacking people, how would that work? It's pretty logical. Just don't get in the water. but but then Peter Benchley, the author, wrote a really cohesive story, at least in the novel. Steven Spielberg. Then they thought, okay, let's write the script for the movie because people are very, very interested in it. So then they tried to look for directors. Nobody would do it. They started to look for actors. Nobody would do it. Some of them owed money to the IRS. Others were felons. Others just couldn't do it. Others were too busy. One actor said like, "Oh, I prefer to actually fish for real fish, not a robotic shark," which is like a mean thing to say. But anyway, they finally chose Steven Spielberg, and he didn't want to do it at first. And he finally took the script, and he started to present his ideas. He barely had a script of his own to put in his own ideas, and he took it to a comedic writer and told him to eviscerate it. I quote. And the studio,
like really like tell him what was wrong with it.
Yeah, like help me out here, trying to make it funny, give it some nice, basically make it like how Marvel is. It has some great action, but it's also funny and it pulls on your strings at points. So at a certain point, to make it basically make it short, so that way you can research it yourself. It almost as if the studio, Universal Studios, were trying to sabotage this whole thing. They didn't want Steven Spielberg to succeed. And he even Spielberg himself recalls that, yeah, this is cool, Mario 1. He recalls that, yeah.
That's Luigi, you fuck.
He let himself go. But he even himself admits that this was a pretty traumatic production for me. Like, he himself still gets nightmares.
And it turned out to be like one of the greatest films in history.
The movie that pretty much defined the term blockbuster. Because it literally busted the block after block after block.
We should watch it. We should watch it again. I want to see it now.
Jaws?
It kind of holds up.
It does. I mean, yeah. Despite how
it's still a pretty
the shark is.
It's still a pretty like eerie suspense movie.
Yeah, and it's not like horror.
I know.
It's very adventurous.
I know you want to keep talking about it, but the fight's over. And Luigi won. I would have thought that Little Mac was gonna come in last. I'm surprised he came in third. You did pretty good, buddy. Nice. Anyway, I would like to keep talking about Jaws. Maybe we should watch it so that we can talk about it more. Because I think
we can make a Jaws review.
There's a lot of interesting things when it comes to like what happened, what it took to make Jaws. It's a very interesting movie and story to learn about.
I'll show you the documentary.
Yeah. So follow us on Facebook, Instagram. Subscribe to YouTube if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening to the audio version, we do have the video version if you want to see our pretty faces. Anything you want to say?
No, not really.
Okay, so we'll see you guys next time, and we're gonna try to keep the video up. Hopefully that works out, baby. Okay, bye.
Yep.
Thank you, man.